Hello Gobs and welcome back to another video. Today I am bringing you more RPG horror stories. Remember, if you ever have a horror story of your own and you want me to read it on the channel, put it in the description below, send it to the subreddit, or you can email me directly if you want it read anonymously or whatever. I don't have anything for today besides read the disclaimer at the beginning. That genuinely has some good stuff in it. These stories may or may not be real. Even if they aren't real, that doesn't mean we can't use them as a hypothetical situation. And if you think a story is fake, then tell me in the comments below, because I'm a goblin and things fly over my head because I'm short. Tell me how your week is going. Tell me something exciting you've done. Okay, I love reading comments, even though I don't get a whole lot of them yet, but I love reading everybody's comments. Okay, we might even make a video on that eventually. I don't know. Anyways, today we are reading more RPG horror stories, as I've said, so we are going to get started. Our first story comes from Iceman EX54. GM makes unwinnable finale, cries when players don't like it. So this is from a campaign I did over a year ago. I thought it'd be a good story to share here. I was invited to play in a tabletop campaign by an old college friend with friends of his. I'm typically stuck as forever GM, so I was down to be a player for once. The setting was low fantasy, Game of Thrones vibes. The system was just a DM rolling a d6 when he felt it was needed and would be roleplay heavy. I'm a theater kid, so roleplay heavy doesn't bother me, but I did express concerns early on that the lack of tangible rules made me a bit uncomfortable, since he often reminded me death is a real possibility. He told me I needed to trust him, and if I wasn't stupid, I'd be fine. Massive red flag in hindsight, but I really just wanted to be a player for once. And he was a friend of a friend, so it couldn't be that bad. Or so I thought. So far, yeah, this sounds very not fun. You guys, if you've seen my previous videos, if not, I am a very raw person. I love rules as written, rules as intended. So starting off so far, this sounds like it's gonna go down the drain very fast. Just the GM rolling a d6 and that's it. Doesn't sound very fun. It might work for some people, but it doesn't work for me. But let's continue reading and see what happens. Fast forward to the finale. I'm playing a nerdy lore bard, my college buddy is a swashbuckling rogue, and the other player is a fighter mercenary. The big bad was a cult leader that had kidnapped some common folk, one of which was my character's childhood best friend, and went into the dark forest. Mercenaries Legion had agreed to help us fight the big bad, so we had about 8 or so extra mercenaries. The day our characters planned to pursue the big bad, Rogue had drank a lot the night prior, and the GM rolls a d6 privately, and tells us Rogue oversleeps and misses our departure. When we ask if we can go wake him up, the GM says, "You don't notice he's not there." Mercenary and I go with a squad of 8 other mercenaries into the dark forest. Shortly after, the big bad's grunts start stealthily taking out the whole squad of mercenaries without any formal combat, just single rolls, and we're told they are dead, leaving only myself and the mercenary to face the big bad. Meanwhile, Rogue has woken up and he's desperately trying to get someone to give him transportation to our location. Rogue makes some progress with some sailors, but eventually they decline him as well. Later on, GM would tell Rogue they declined him because they didn't like his tone. Mercy and I finally get to the clearing where the big bad has the common folks. GM describes the commoners as tied around a big tree and that the big bad has 30 followers there on guard. Mercenary and I feel like there's no way we can take them head on, so Mercenary steps out from the bushes and tries to negotiate with the big bad, since him and Mercenary were raised in the same culture. Mercenaries give a great speech in my opinion, saying that this isn't what their ancestors would want if he does this. Then the other nations will declare war on their people. I'm thinking this is great. You should at least get a roll to persuade the big bad, but no. The GM says the big bad is too fanatic and proceeds to light the tree on fire, killing all the commoners. And the GM makes sure to describe in detail how my childhood friend burned alive. So Mercenary and I just flee, not knowing what else to do there, and that ends the campaign. It's roughly 2 a.m. at this point. Rogue has fallen asleep and the table is relatively silent. The GM starts freaking out a bit and asking why we're not discussing the finale more. I just say that it's late and the ending was a bit of a downer. The GM starts saying that I can't have everything my way, and my character needed a childhood best friend to die for the story to have consequences. Mercenary then asks if there was a way we could have been able to save everyone. The GM goes off the deep end, calling himself a failure who can't do anything right, and he starts crying. After a minute, he grabs all his stuff and leaves. I haven't played with that group since. My college buddy did reach out and ask if I wanted to do a follow-up Season 3 campaign. I politely declined. Edit. I commented this, but I also want to add it to OP. When Rogue was left behind, Mercenary and I both objected. The DM said that we needed to trust him. I, at least, took this as meaning the DM and Rogue had a plan for a cool moment later on. They did not. Oh no, it's not the worst horror story that we've read of in here. At least there wasn't nothing crazy happening. It's just a bit of a, well, you can kind of foresee it with the way the campaign was set up. And I mean, even then, if this was an actual play or whatever, using actual rules or whatever, it still could have gone the exact same way. Because again, 2v30, you can't really do anything. All you have left to do is negotiate. What does he want them to do? Roll initiative against 30 people? I mean, maybe if this was a bigger system where you had like AoE spells or something, but what do you want them to do for a finale? And then having everyone just die without being able to save them at all or anything? Like, what did the DM want the players to do? They were kind of just shafted not to be able to do anything, especially in a system where they don't know exactly the full extent of what they can do since there's no set rules. So all in all, I think that the GM should have just picked a system, even if it's a rules-light system. They could have picked freaking Yokai Hunter Society for all that matters, or even 5e isn't that deep of a rule set, or D&D 1, whichever, but it's not that deep of a rule set, and I feel like you would have a much better experience just running and putting this into an actual campaign. But some people prefer the heavy roleplay as opposed to the more combat inclined 5e, so I can kind of get it, but I still say there's a system, especially, I think there's even a Game of Thrones system called Sword of Fire and Ice. I think that's what it's called. You can't really be upset about them if you don't really give them an obvious way out, or if you're thinking it's going to go down different. I mean, what are you supposed to do? It's 2v30. So, whatever. It's kind of like a bittersweet ending. At least he didn't keep going, but that was the finale. So, I hope OP has found a better game, or has moved on from this. So, I should say, needing the childhood friend to die because of story reasons is also pretty douchebaggery, unless you talk with the players and you set that up as expectations, like, hey, characters related to your character, your player character, are able to die in this campaign, so just be warned. But it's kind of just out of the blue, like, oh, he needs to die because it's vital to my plot. Not really. He does not really. What is him needing to die for the plot to have stakes? I mean, him tying to a tree and being set afire is already high enough stakes. I mean, if they don't rescue them, they get set on fire. But the way the DM had set it up was that there was no way to rescue them. So, anyways, we're moving on to the next story. Our next story comes from MindMan95YT. If you guys are YouTube, check him out. Tales of the OPPC. So, for some context, I'm the DM in only one of these stories, and in all the others, I am a player. Now, let's get on with these. First off, we have the High Elf Prince. He is also a fighter and refuses to take a subclass, arguably PC's most smug and annoying character he has created. Now, during the first session, we get to introduce to the BGG. BGG? Big Good Guy? An ancient black dragon. Now, for context, we all were level 2 characters. Me, a warlock, trying to convince it to let us go. I bet you all can guess what happened next. He rolls to hit the dragon, saying that he should be able to take it out in a couple of hits. We barely managed to get out of the death trap of an encounter. The next time he tries to do this is when he attacks a group of mind flayers by himself. Just for some added context, he's now the king of his kingdom because his dad died due to some random assassins. So me and the rest of the party rushed to save him. The results in the entire party getting banished to some other plane of existence. During our time there, he challenged another character to a duel to the death because that character was asking about a cave. This is when we find about his OP feature. Whenever he goes to 0 HP, he instead goes to 1 and gains advantage on attack. Their character died that day. Next we have the half-orc cleric. We are introduced to the character after finishing a dungeon and getting a lore important item. He introduced himself by using a spell that creates bombs. I have no clue if this is even a real spell. This does enough damage to knock down 2 of our party members. We are now level 6. Then, from there, playing the same elf character as before, while always threatening to use their bomb cell. Then we have the Bloody Paladin. This is shockingly enough Oathbreaker Paladin, who's a human. He introduced his new character by trying to kill our Dragonborn Barbarian. Now for context, I was DMing and it was my first time dealing with a paladin. He then says that he can add his hit die to the damage on his sword and that he should be feared by the entire party because he kills cultists. Only one other character knew who he was. Everyone hated him and tried to kill him twice in that session. He left only after 2 sessions, which is probably a good thing. That so far is all the dumb stuff he has done. Well, I'm almost inclined to kind of say the story might be a bit fakey. I don't know. I don't want to point any fingers, but we're gonna read it as if it were real, and if it is real, I am sorry. But that is what I proclaim, and I'm the Goblin King. So, first of all, I was reading the comments, and someone said it's kind of crazy to have level 2 characters be introduced to the BGG. I still have no idea what BGG. I heard of Big Bad Evil Guy, BBG, but BGG sounds like Big Good Guy? I don't know. It was an ancient black dragon at level 2, first of all. I mean, you can make it work, but you can, you always, you have to thank D&D players if this is what the system is in. It doesn't really say, besides the Oathbreaker Paladin, Warlock. Okay, we're just gonna assume it's 5e, but 5e players tend to be a bit kill everything on sight if it's presented as a challenge to them. And yeah, so introducing an ancient black dragon this early a level it's kind of bad. I mean, if you instead of having it directly available to them, but I can kind of see it. You negotiate with the black dragon to let you get away or whatever, and then then you come back later to fight it. But that player wanted to attack a black dragon. A group of mind flayers challenged something to the death. Mind you, if this is happening at level 6, why are they getting banished? Banishment's like a whatever level spell. You'll see it on the screen, but I'm pretty sure it's way above level 6. It's like a level 4 spell, or yeah, it's like a level 4, level 5. So it might even be higher than that. I don't know. I'm not gonna look it up right now. But how they're getting banished already to another plane of existence? I mean, unless this is in the story, I don't think that should really be happening. Kind of sounds like a sandboxy thing. So, whatever, the classic Oathbreaker Paladin. I've never liked Oathbreakers. They're just not interesting to me enough. At least from the people I've played with and the stories I've seen. Anybody who wants to play Oathbreaker isn't really doing it for the role-playing side, but more for Oathbreakers tend to be a bit powerful. Because Oathbreaker was introduced in the DMG as a class for villains. So a player wanting to play one has to have a very good reason, and it has to definitely be for role-playing. I think paladins make great role-playing classes when people play it that way, but usually they're just used to power build and max. So, but we're talking about the player. I guess it's a good thing that he left eventually. I mean, DMing for the first time, I'm not going to say too much about DMing for the first time. I'm not going to say, oh, you should know all the rules and blah, 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 blah. You should be able to know how to deal with the base classes of a system before you DM, really, I guess. I don't know. The first time I DM'd, I never really sort of had that problem, but everyone is different. So I'm not going to say, should have known better. I'm going to say, not on the OP, but on the player side, should have been more lenient towards the DM. Always be lenient if it's someone's first time DMing. Never throw the book at them and expecting them to be the best storyteller ever. So that's all I'm going to say. As far as being OP, I guess the Oathbreaker, the elf wasn't really anything. The only thing OP, they said the OP feature was OP, and yes, going down to 0 HP, then getting advantage on attack rolls. It really depends if they got that through the story after a long trivial quest or something, or not trivial, but you know, if they did something great in the story to earn them that feature, then I think that feature is fine. If it's like for a little bit, it all depends on how the feature was earned and how the feature works. But yes, it can be OP at first, but we would have to see the down to details. And I mean, they did end up dying anyways, so. And then the bomb spell, whatever, I'm not sure what they could be talking about, so I can't really tell you if that's OP or not. I mean, it knocks down 2 of them, but they could have just rolled low and the person could have just rolled high. And then finally, the Oathbreaker Paladin. I guess it's a bit OP. I haven't sat down and seen anyone play it through, but just reading from the DMG, it sounds overpowered. So I guess all in all, they did make an OP PC. Moving on to our next and our final story, as we have time for one more story. We're going to end off this episode on an extra long story. So this story comes from Host South. DM called me a murder hobo for trying to climb a wall. TLDR, experienced DM invented his own system, a combo of 1E and 3E, and insisted we move through a dungeon in turn order, forcing us to separate the party and leave our spellcasters vulnerable. I didn't want to spend a whole campaign in turn order, so I left. The next day, he posted looking for new players, saying he had accidentally invited a murder hobo to the party, when the only thing I had done the whole session was try to climb a wall, which I was not allowed to attempt. In hindsight, there were a few red flags. An experienced DM posted looking for new campaign members. He wanted to talk first to see if they were a good fit. Red flag number 1. On the car, he spent an hour monologuing about past campaigns and didn't ask anything about me, but he promised a roleplay rich, 80% roleplay, 20% combat, which was intriguing after mostly playing in murder hobo parties. Red flag number 2. He couldn't direct me to any resources about the system, which I now think he has invented, only saying that was a mix of 1E and 3E. I was excited about learning those systems, and I told him I'd be happy to participate as long as he could give me guidance. Red flag number 3. He monologued for the first 30 minutes under the guise of us all being able to share our strengths and weaknesses, but did not give any space for anyone to say anything. Red flag number 4. During his monologue, he commented about an experience he had with his friend's wife. She wanted to do a attack someone. He tried to convince her that she had other more interesting options. She eventually got fed up being told what to do and decided to leave the game. His takeaway? I should have explained it to her better. The way he told it, it was clear that it wasn't ill-advised to make the attack. He was just committed to more interesting options. I can see his point, but this is not the game style that I'm used to. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, remembering that he was committed to a more role-playing game, and maybe he wasn't manipulative in general, but he had to double down in this case. But I was starting to paint an image of a DM who gets into intractable arguments with players until they quit, rather than someone with the conflict resolution skills needed to navigate different perspectives and allow for the character free will. Red flag number 5. While I was in the bathroom, I was gone 2 minutes tops, we started playing. We were in a cave and we could see red eyes gleaming around us. We had gotten a complete understanding of the map of the cave from a drow elf. One player, who admitted to being a bit of a ruler, insisted on trying to talk to the drow, wondering why he shared this information. He tried role-playing. He put on a voice and everything. We were told the drow walked away before we could interact with him. Red flag number 6. I was confused as to how we got in a cave. I was directed to the Slack. I looked through the Slack channel and all I could find is what I already knew. We had returned to our hometown to find a dragon that we needed to slay to avoid the townspeople from fleeing. I pressed the issue and was given no additional context other than We were chasing monsters and fell into a cave. You have to forgive the background noise. Somebody is mowing or something. But continuing on. Now, I'm currently in 2 murder hobo parties. I've never been forced into combat before. This is not what DM had promised. I thought of how other DMs would play this scenario. We would hear about monsters at a tavern rich with caricatures. We would find the mayor, duke, blair, and sheriff. They would tell us it was essential that people didn't flee the town. They might even have a map of the cave, which would have been a better explanation than a drow who wouldn't talk to us. I was beginning to get an image of someone who doesn't have the same idea of roleplay as I do. Red flag number 7. I was trying to play a dex-based character. I hadn't chosen her weapons, but I saw she had a climbing axe. I suggested climbing the walls and was ridiculed. I stood up for myself. My character has a dex of 18 with an axe. She should be able to climb mud walls. I tried to roleplay her going to the cave walls to investigate, but I was shut down. I was a bit confused, thinking how different this was from other games I had played. I figured even though he's an experienced DM, he's just not creative. He's got a script. He doesn't want us to roleplay, so maybe I'm now in a 3rd combat-heavy campaign. I'll give it a few sessions and see how it goes. Red flag number 8. My inventory was empty, and frankly, I was a bit miffed that I hadn't had a chance to stock up on things in town before leaving to chase monsters. I asked about this and was told I could write down whatever fit in the box. This seemed like an invitation to magic wand, literally or figuratively, our way out of the situation, but I could tell this DM had a plan, and despite his attestations that anything was possible and he liked creative solutions. He wasn't ready for anything other than going through the dungeon according to the script. Final straw. We figured out a marching order and we started moving through the dungeon together. We were told we could not do this and we had to act in turn order. Rule's lawyer was not happy about this and an argument ensued. Rule's lawyer relented and we each took a turn moving out allotted 6 squares. After the 3rd person's turn, the person who was introduced himself as Squishy, who I promised to protect, DM started rolling a random encounter. Rule's lawyer was real mad. We went around and around trying to figure out a way to move together. DM said, "Maybe if you want to tie yourself together with rope." I said to the DM calmly, "This won't work for me, I don't want to play this way." Others chimed in and agreed. I said, "Can we find some compromise?" And again, he insisted on turn order. I said, "If we really have to do this on turn order, I think I'm going to leave. I have executive functioning issues, and I'm just looking for something more engaging." I thanked him for his time and calmly left. The next day, he was on the meetup group looking for new players, saying how he accidentally invited a murder hobo and a rules lawyer to his campaign that was going to start screening for antisocial tendencies. I didn't roll any dice the whole 2 hours I was there. No one did. My character didn't move, speak, or observe. None of our characters did. So yeah, I guess I'm a murder hobo and we are antisocial for wanting to interact with our environment. Oh, where to even start? I'm going to start off by saying not all of these seem like total red flags. But some of them, yes, some of them are definitely red flags. Some of these just seem like minor issues. The way this DM is running, not setting to a specific system, it can kind of just be like, especially having to move through a dungeon and turn order. You're going to be stuck in that dungeon for like 3 sessions after that. I mean, unless it's a really small dungeon, but usually most dungeons are having to spend every turn order specifically moving your characters. Now, I don't know the system, but in most other systems, the only time you roll for initiative is when there's something to do in turn order, such as fighting or even traps. You can do traps in turn order, such as being presented with a large hallway. You tell everyone to roll for initiative. And then everyone moves, does their things, checks out, spends their turn, move on to the next person. That way you can't really have this thing like, oh, well, I peek around a corner and then I peek back. And then I peek around a corner and then I peek back. And then I go forward and I tap the ground with the thing and I move back. It's really more to see what you spend how you're going to interact with the trap when it actually springs up itself, or if you manage to find it and disarm it. That's just more of a little nitpicky thing. The whole wanting more roleplay than combat, but then not letting them roleplay. Yeah, that's the big issue. Now, about climbing the mud wall, it's like, if the DM says you can't, usually I would say, I wouldn't sit and argue about it. I'd kind of like, I might be able to do it, or I might not be able to do it. The DM says I can't. Now, I'm not going to say the DM is the grand arbiter of all the rules. But, the story is somewhat set up to go a certain way than having to climb the mud walls. I mean, granted, I think climbing a mud wall, even with an axe and a high dex, would be pretty hard. It should still be explored somewhat. Sounds like the DM might be just a bit narrow-minded, but, if you say the walls are unclimbable, then the players should respect that the walls are unclimbable. That's just a little nitpick. Of course, there was far other things that were wrong. Again, it sounded like more just uninterested with how everything was going. I could understand moving through the dungeon in turn order being awful. It sounds awful. I'd rather just explain the scenarios instead of having like, okay, where do you move next? Okay, what do you do next? Okay, what's your action next? Rather than just explaining the rooms and having to move about and interact with the environment rather than doing turn order. Because that just sounds awful, especially if you roll low and, again, like they got separated. I'm trying to figure out how they got separated if they were all moving 6 squares together. Details don't matter. It just wasn't a fun way of playing. They didn't have fun. I mean, if you have that many red flags, generally I think 3 red flags, you're done. But they went to 10 or so, 8 to 10 red flags. I mean, if you were already picking up that many red flags, I would have said left earlier. But everybody's minds works differently. We don't pick up on everything. Sayings are different when you're playing them as opposed when you're not playing them. So, whatever. But that will conclude our stories for today. If you would have done something different, tell me in the comments below. If you had a favorite part or something, if you had a most hated story or what you would have done different, then go ahead and type that all out. If you enjoyed the video, I don't care about liking and subscribing. Just do whatever you want to do. I don't care. If you like the video, like it. If you don't, I'm not going to beg for likes. So do all that good stuff or whatever. The Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. Check that out. It's in the description. Check out the subreddit. It's kind of just like my Twitter where I go and post up videos. This is just starting out, so the more followers I get on stuff, the more I'll start to branch out and do things. As of now, I'm just going to stick to my uploading schedule and maybe some video ideas. And then we'll go from there and we'll start expanding out. We might get like a Discord set up or something. I don't know. We're just gonna go and see what happens. So check the Twitter, check the Reddit. I think that's everything. Email me if you have a horror story or something, and that's about it. I hope you guys have a lop of a day.